subscribe so that laser pointer stops pointing through your window. Okay. What are we talking about today? Melin's salvation plan? Um, you know, this one's a little weird because, like, I feel like everything's there for it to be really good, but there's, like, these little elements that keep adding up to make me kind of annoyed with the story overall. Where things I feel like just fit together too well without enough of a reason. So, I mean, it's still overall pretty good, so I'll give it a 7. Um, I don't know, it's just, it's good, but there's just, like, little things that nag at me constantly throughout this story. But what's the gist? Well, the main character gets reincarnated because, yes, it's an isekai, and oh my god, I've done a million isekais, and yes, yeah. Yes, it's an isekai. She gets reincarnated. She's basically like a nothing burger character that just kind of is meant to die really early on to set, like, the male lead on his, like, path. She's the male lead's first love, right? And she looks very similar to the female lead and things like that. But whatever. So yeah, she's like, the first love, and shows up and, is kind of brought into this world when, the male lead's a little younger. Basically, they're in this, like, orphanage. There's this orphanage that's kind of, like, corrupt, where her and the male lead are. They're basically, like, taking in illegitimate noble children and things like that, and pretty much just using them to get money. Basically, like, selling them off if they need to, or whatever. Treating them poorly, things like that. And her and the male lead show up in this orphanage, and basically because she knows what's going to happen, the start of the story is basically her just trying to leave. The idea in her mind is this character there's actually 3 male leads on a technical level. The original story was supposed to be like a reverse harem thing. But who cares about what the original story is supposed to be? Whatever, doesn't matter. But basically, she's at this orphanage, this male lead shows up, and then she's kind of trying to, care for him to a certain degree, while also trying to formulate, like, an escape plan so she can get out of there. There's this, like, duke that this male lead ends up getting with. He ends up becoming, like, the adoptive son of this duke. So basically her idea is get to this duke, and then we can kind of sort everything out from there, get the story rolling, and not have as much, pain and anguish for this male lead. And, she doesn't die, because in the original story, the basic thing is, well, the male lead needs some reason to be all upset and want the female lead, so his first love dies, and because the female lead looks so similar, he ends up falling in love with the female lead because she looks like his first love. But in this case, she doesn't want to die, so she has to kind of get this guy out of there and, escape before she ends up getting killed. Which is all fine and dandy. I mean, that setup and everything, and then, like, her wanting to go around and help the other male leads, things like that. It's relatively basic. My main issues come in with, like, little things. Like, she goes to this duke, and she basically breaks into his house, and then he's just kind of, like, okay with it? And just does weird things, like taking her word for things, and, he's willing to help her out and things like that. And I think the implication is, well, there is a clear implication that I feel like is kind of spoilery, but maybe not. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. Maybe it's really obvious. I don't know. But there's a connection, let's say, between her and this duke, seemingly. Um, the problem with that is like, okay, well, he just somehow, this Duke just naturally understands this, which is a little weird. And also, like, I it's just like this random character that dies early on in the story just so happens to have a connection to the Duke that just so happens to have a connection to one of the male leads, and it's like, it's so convoluted just to get the ball rolling, which is like, I don't know, it's instantly putting the story in a bad light for me. But even like not on that point, like the other, like when you get to the other characters, there still becomes more issues. This one I'll say, okay, he's okay. I don't really see any major problems there. I feel like it's a bit weird in terms of how it's written. Like, you know, he doesn't feel very human-like when she tries to interact with him, but you know, whatever. My main issues, you know, number one, this character is kind of just, I don't know how you put it, like bland. He basically just follows her around. um, it's just like a nothing burger character. Also, he just comes along and the Duke also accepts him, even though she's the one that he seems to take an interest in. Whatever, that's fine. This guy's attitude is just illogical. Like, there are times when he'll get upset with her for no reason, and then, you know, they really have no reason why he's upset, so they kind of just have to play ball with it in order to get the story rolling. So basically, like, he'll just irrationally do things, and it's just like, I don't know. It seems like poor storytelling because the only reason they're doing it is just to get the plot rolling. And it feels very blatant. Like, you see this in a lot of stories where they just need to get, you know, point A to point B, so they just make things happen. But they normally have some reason as to why things happen, but he's just kind of like, they use him as like a just tool to get things going at times, where he's just like irrationally upset at her. He wants to kill her, but then the next moment he loves her, and it's like, it's the most irrational thought process I've ever seen, and it's very annoying and just kind of like, why am I listening to this? Also, I'll say, like, her personality is very strange because at the start she's kind of like cold, I guess you could say. Like, she feels very calculated, but then later on she ends up just being like naive, and I feel like it's a very weird personality shift, and she'll go like back and forth between these two all the time, and it's like, what the hell is her actual personality? I feel like there's very little consistency with her character. And also, like I said, I don't really like how she kind of just, I don't know, it seems like everything with her is like a plot convenience. Like, it just, oh, it works out. Or, you know, she just so happens to be linked to this, or so happens to be linked to that. And it's just kind of like, I don't know. I'm not saying it's, like, odd, or this story does it specifically, and that's why it's annoying, but it's just like, I feel like it stands out so much that it's just like, I don't know. To me, it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth where I'm like, I don't really enjoy how that works. Also, the Duke, although he's like brought up to be some like super big part of the story, he kind of ends up just being like pushed off to the side and like irrelevant half the time. And then like they just kind of focus on her. Like, they'll just like throw characters out of the story just so they can focus back on her. And it doesn't really feel that logical. Like, they go away for like, I don't know, 5 years at one point, and it's just like, okay, so they leave for 5 years, and during that time there is no reason why like they can't visit each other. Like, it's really not brought up. Like, they just kind of like skip it and they assume like, oh, yeah, they just didn't talk for 5 years. And you're like, they didn't even try? They didn't like message each other, or like, you know, whatever. It's just like, I don't really like, they just wanted a time skip, so they did a time skip. I don't know. It's just like a very, it feels like everything is just for the sake of plot convenience, and I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, but when it feels so overt, it's kind of hard to read at times, and it's just kind of like, really? Like, you can't hide that a little bit? I don't know. Whatever. I'm not gonna go too much more in depth. I think you get the gist. The story it's not necessarily bad in its totality, but there are little elements of it, like those little cracks that make it kind of annoying. Um, but yeah, whatever. I guess to end, we'll just do the old SAE. So what is the SAE? Well, it's story, art, enjoyment. Story-wise, you know, I don't want to say it's bad because of these cracks. It's just, they're just annoying, if I'm being perfectly honest. So I think I'd probably give it like a 6. Art-wise, you know, looking back at it, it kind of reminds me of, you know, it has that webtoon quality of like early art shows signs of like, oh, they don't really understand perspective or whatever. I'm not listen, I'm not an artist. I'm just saying they don't like. I am no artist. I am just saying that like you can like even as a layman you can tell like, oh, that they're not like looking in the right way, or like their eyes are slightly off, like they're not looking in the same direction. But it does improve over time, so I don't necessarily want to hit it that hard. Because like most of it is good, I'd probably give it like a 6. I do think early on it might be a little bit worse, but eh. As far as enjoyment goes, you know what? We're getting the sign of the beast here. Oh god, maybe this is like Satan in the form of a story. I know I gave it a better rating at the start, but after really talking about it, I think this is probably more fair. As far as story goes, like, yeah, 6. I mean, it's alright. It's not gonna blow your mind, and the problem is like these little cracks in the facade that make it a little more read. Art-wise, early on it's a little rough. It definitely feels like someone that's a little bit newer. But it does get better later on, so I think a 6 is fair. And then as far as enjoyment goes, I don't know, those little cracks just kind of annoy me. It's just one of those things where it's like, I enjoy the series for the most part, but those little tiny cracks are like, ah, that's annoying. Like, can you just tighten this up a little bit, you know, make the story a little better, and oh man, so much better. So yeah, I think a 6 is fair. Like, it's fun for the most part, that just those little things are kind of like, eh. So yeah, I don't know, overall 6. It's solid, like it's not bad or anything, but I wouldn't like go out of my way to read it. It kind of just feels like someone's, I don't know, it just feels like an early work by someone, which is fine, you know, everybody starts somewhere. It's just not something that I would be like, oh man, this is great. It's just, it's alright. Not gonna blow your mind, but not like bad either. Just wouldn't go out of my way for it. But yeah, I think that's about it. I'd appreciate if you could like, comment, subscribe, blah blah blah, you know, the gist. And yeah, I'll see you.